all I've done. But I'm not the only one. In a dark place, I told some lies. But I'm not the only one. We all got secrets under the sun. In the shadows, we played the game. Now I'm standing here taking the blame. A lot of y'all was at the freak off too, so don't put it all on me. That's just the truth. I've been up and down this road trying to find my peace. Confessions of a man without a release. Oh, now, hey. In the mirror, I saw the truth hiding in plain view. I'm coming clean now, this burden to undo. We were all there dancing shadows in the night, acting wrong when we knew what was right. But deep inside, there's more you must see. In this room of mirrors, it's not just me. I walk this path with heavy chains, trying to shed those sins, erase the stains. I've seen the highs and the crushing lows, fading in the spotlight. That's how it goes. Here, hard on my sleeve, trying to clear the air, let the demons relieve. Every wrong turn and every mistake led me to this moment, let my soul quake. Plays a part.
Nobody knows why liars lie. Winners are not allowed to allow losers to rewrite history. It's God's side and the other side.
Country bumpkin black dude that can't talk good. And look like Mr. Potato Head.
I didn't want to be a movie star.
No, you couldn't be a movie star. Ricky Smiley can't act. Cause Ricky Smiley can't act. Why is he in a dress again? He didn't be wanting to Barbie. And you gotta tell him no. Said ain't got no special, you remember. Eve ain't got no special, you remember. Ricky ain't got no special, you remember. Sir, I have 12 comedy specials. P. Diddy or whoever you is. TVJ, turn it up. And I won't stop burning you down until there ain't nothing left. Rubble on top of rubble and I'll still be bombing. Look like a wall, Richard. Look like a wall. You didn't say no. Look like a wall, Richard. Look like a wall. You didn't say no.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning back in once again to the original Queen Ahmadiyyah Shakur show. I'm your host, Queen Ahmadiyyah Shakur, and this is your daily vitamins. Okay, so as you're coming in, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done so already, be sure to click that notification bell and click the word all so you're notified each time the Queen Goddess goes live. Okay, so let's get ready to get into it, honey. This is all nefarious. Okay, so more information on Diddy, but first of all, let's see who's in here. Okay. Juju B said, look like a walrus. Okay, let's have a brief word from my sponsor at 12 Tribes before we get into it.
Do not buy 12 Tribes on Earth hair growth oil and hair magic elixir unless you want super healthy, gorgeous hair that grows. They have a whole line of amazing hair growth products, including hair growth leave-in conditioner spray, hair growth shampoo, hair growth spray, and hair growth butter. I'm starting to sense a theme here. They include quality natural ingredients. They smell amazing, and you can see the results for yourself. So if you're looking for healthy hair growth for your natural or relaxed hair, try 12 Tribes on Earth today.
Okay, so with that all being said, don't forget you can purchase 12 Tribes hair oil at Etsy.com. Just look for Lisa Crafts. You can also find it at Walmart.com. Okay, now I wasn't even going to go live again, honey. I was just going to do a couple of quick uploads and call it a night. Okay, but I decided to go ahead and go live. So one of the videos that I pre-recorded, or that I already I recorded it. I'm going to be showing that, okay? And it's very interesting. Okay, so anyway, with that all being said, let's see who's in here. All right, Dervis, Michael Bell is here, Bithia, Sandra. All right, Elizabeth, Lillian X is in the house, Desmond, We the People, Erlene, 504 Nola, Mel is here, Terry. All right, Gwendolyn, Elizabeth. Okay, let's get into it, Sandra. Okay, Leon's in the house. Barnabas is here. Shout out to everybody in the chat and everyone tuned into the Queen. And y'all know I love me some loyal royals. Okay, and a big shout out to my moderators putting in work. I see you, human nature. Okay, so China M is in the house. Okay, so let's get into it, honey, because you all know that Diddy had his pre-trial hearing today. Now, usually when Diddy's in court, y'all know I like to come on here and we play our music and we have a good time and all of that. And we check for the updates, okay, with the journalist that I happen to follow. But so today I was busy, so I didn't really get on live about it, but I do have the information. Now, in that pre-trial hearing, you know, they said Diddy seemed like he was in good spirits, you know, smiling and all of that. And, you know, he's probably happy because the request that he put into the judge, which I told you all about earlier on the previous broadcast, he asked if he could wear regular clothes. He didn't want to be sitting there in his prison or jail clothes. And of course, they said that he would be able to, but he has to wear shoes with no laces. Now, I was talking to somebody about that, and they were like, can you imagine wearing shoes with no laces? That's just tacky, da, da, da. And I said, well, listen, this, you know, they don't have to bring him shoes minus the laces. They can just bring him shoes that don't have laces, period. You know, like some slip-ons, like some Gucci dress shoes. They don't have laces most of the time, at least the ones I see usually don't. You can just slip your feet in. So it's not like he's going to be sitting there with no shoelaces, but holes where shoelaces go. Okay. I just wanted to make that clear because you know how some people's minds work. Okay. So anyway, with that all being said, let's get into the details of it all. And we also are going to talk about Caysen Allison. Now, for those of you who missed that broadcast, I'm going to show a couple of snippets of my video that I did because I actually brought this case up. Caysen Allison is somebody who killed a classmate, similar to the situation with Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf. Well, his verdict came in. And so we're going to talk about that. Okay. I want to show the double standards and all of that. Okay. But here's the interesting thing that happened at the plea deal, at the pre-trial today for Diddy. So basically, Diddy turned down a plea deal again in front of the judge. Okay, because remember, they supposedly offered Diddy a plea deal before, and I guess they offered it again today. I don't know if it's the same one. It probably was a different one, because usually what they'll do is when they offer plea deals, they'll usually come to you with one offer, and if you don't accept it, you reject it, then they come back with one that they think is better. And so apparently they came back and I guess they thought it was better, but Diddy still said no right in front of the judge. So he's not trying to hear it. He wants to go to trial. Okay. So Diddy turns down plea deal in court. Judge rules on jury selection before trial. Okay. So let's talk about it. Sean Diddy Combs officially turned down a potential plea deal in front of a judge in court at the final hearing before his highly anticipated federal S crimes trial. Now, over the last month, Combs has appeared in court a handful of times as federal prosecutors and the disgraced hip-hop mogul's attorneys have ironed out the kinks of what is already shaping up to be one of the most closely followed celebrity trials in recent history or memory. With most of the legal housekeeping out of the way, both parties met with Judge Arun Subramanian on May the 1st at a federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan for one last pretrial conference, days before Combs' trial kicks off May the 5th. Now, the rapper was arrested in September and subsequently charged with racketeering, ass trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Of course, he's pleaded not guilty to all 5 counts. Now, with that all being said, in court, the music magnate was in good spirits, they say. Combs grinned and hugged his team, waving to the gallery at the Daniel Patrick Moynihan United States Courthouse as soon as he walked in. He spoke animatedly with his hands and donned wide-rimmed black glasses while he was reading documents at the defense table. Now, at one point, he bowed his head and scrawled on a flashcard propped on his lap. Okay, his large crown tattoo visible on his neck above his tan prison garb. I mean, they are so descriptive. It just makes me think. It just makes me think of Diddy sitting there and they're just fawning over him, just watching him so intensely. Okay, please pay attention. Mel says, I can imagine how much time they are offering him. Honey, they probably offered him like 15 years. Because, you know, they're saying that Diddy could get life. So they probably offered him like 10 to 15 years. And Diddy's not having any of it. Okay, please pay attention. Okay, y'all already know Diddy's not going for that. Okay. Now, with that all being said, judge says Sean Diddy Combs can wear court-approved clothes during the trial. Okay. So questions arose at an earlier pretrial hearing about whether Diddy rejected a plea deal proposed by federal prosecutors. A week later, Judge Subramaniam received answers. So during questioning by the judge, Combs had the option to sit down or he could stand up. Well, he stood up, and the judge told him he could sit down, and he said, I'm good. The judge asked whether he had any drugs or alcohol in the last 24 hours, and he responded, no, Your Honor. Subramaniam asked if his mind was clear today, and Combs responded, yes, Your Honor. The judge also asked whether Combs had discussed the plea offer with his team, and Combs confirmed that he did before the judge clarified whether he rejected his plea deal, to which Combs said, yes, I do, Your Honor. Thank you. Okay, it's like, honey, no, thank you. Okay, so one of Combs' attorneys raised an issue with lawyer Lisa Bloom. Okay, the women's rights attorney and daughter of Gloria Allred. Wait a minute, did y'all know this? Daughter of Gloria Allred, honey, are y'all serious? Did y'all know? How many of you knew that Lisa Bloom was Gloria Allred's daughter? Did you all know that? I had no idea. Now it is all making sense. Okay, you really learn something new every day, honey. This is hilarious to the queen. Okay, because I was thinking, honey, that Lisa Bloom is just like Gloria Allred. And by that, I mean nefarious. Okay, this is all hilarious. You all are saying you did, honey. I did not know. I had never even thought about it. So that's interesting. Okay, DSB just gifted the channel a membership. Thank you, beloved. I appreciate you. Peace, love, and blessings. You all shout out DSB. DSB also just gave me a super chat. Says, Shalom, Queen, my warrior sister and family in the chat. Thank you, beloved. Shalom to you as well. Wow, I'm still blown away by the fact that these two are a mother and daughter. Okay, yeah, like I said, now it's all making sense. Okay, so anyway, Combs' legal team called Bloom's behavior deeply disturbing multiple times, arguing that she's using the doc to bolster her client's credibility. Now, Combs' team added that they have done everything we can to speak to Bloom respectfully. Okay, when Subramaniam questioned Combs' lawyers about whether Bloom had violated any rules of professional conduct, Combs' attorney said she wouldn't go as far as to say that. Now, the judge then reminded both legal camps about the rules surrounding professional conduct, including that the court won't tolerate violations, and reminded everyone of Combs' right to a fair trial. Well, it's a little too late for that, because here's the thing. They didn't issue a gag order when they requested it, and I really think that they should have. Okay, I really think that they should have. First of all, here's my thing. The victims shouldn't have wanted to talk about it anyway. The victims should not have wanted to discuss what they were going to say, in my opinion, until they went to trial. Especially if they feared for their lives or they were worried and concerned, like many of them were saying, then why would you be going around talking about it? You should probably just wait until the trial. But also, you know, like I said, that's just my opinion. But at the end of the day, what do y'all think about it? Do you all think that they should have, you know, and then also the thing with the attorneys. The attorneys definitely, I don't even think the judge should have had to give them a gag order. They should have known that there are certain things they should not be saying. Okay, Tony Busby, all right, saying certain things. Even, in my opinion, some of the things that Tyrone Blackburn said, and I actually like Tyrone Blackburn, but some of the things he said, like when he was saying, talking about King Combs and the allegations against him from Grace O'Marcaig, and he said, well, I guess the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. That's opinionated. And as an attorney, you're not supposed to really be opinionated because that shows bias. You're supposed to stick to the facts. So a lot of these attorneys were doing too much, in my opinion. And then we have the nefarious, shady attorney, what's her name? Ariel Mitchell Kidd, who flat out lied. Okay. She flat out lied, got up there and said on News Nation that she saw one of the freak off tapes with a celebrity, high profile, and that she could see them very good, and that, you know, it didn't look as though they knew they were being recorded. And then come to find out there's no such tape that she ever saw. So yeah, they should have told them to keep their mouths shut, because like I keep telling y'all, all this stuff's going to be problematic if Diddy gets convicted, and then they come back on appeal and have all of these different issues that they already brought up. Okay, so please pay attention. Now, with that all being said, federal prosecutors and Combs' lawyers reached an agreement where potential jurors will be brought into the courtroom one by one, and they'll be questioned one at a time. Members of the press are allowed to be present for that, but both sides agreed. Now, pay attention. Both sides agreed that if any particularly sensitive questions arise and the prospective juror is uncomfortable, the jury candidate can participate in a sidebar in a separate room. Okay, well, here's the thing. Mark Agnifilo, during this pretrial, Mark Agnifilo brought this up. Now, I wrote some notes down so I don't forget. He said something about how, hold on. He brought up the fact that usually what they do, he said, Your Honor, sometimes we let press go to the sidebar, but here there will be more personal information on the jurors. Okay, so basically saying that they probably shouldn't do that, because there's going to be even more private information that the jurors may not want these reporters to see. Okay, so that's likely why if they do have a sidebar, it'll be in a different room, a separate room. Now, although Subramanian worried that the jury selection process would take a significant amount of time, since lawyers hope to question as many as 150 potential jurors, and each questionnaire would take 20 to 30 minutes, federal prosecutors believe they can make it work. Prosecutors say they won't need to see all 150 potential jurors if they are able to narrow it down to 45 qualified jurors quickly. Okay. And shout out to journalist Patrick Ryan for getting all this information. Okay, because if I'd known he was going to do all this, I wouldn't have been taking so many notes when I was actually watching the pretrial. Okay, so anyway, or I wasn't watching it, but I was tuned into another journalist who reports on it. The one that I use, Inner City Press. Okay, so the May 1st hearing primarily discussed jury selection, which begins Monday, May the 5th. Prosecutors and Combs' defense team plan to go through 50 jurors a day and narrow it down until they get 45 qualified jurors. Now, Combs' attorney ensured that he would be present for the sequestered jury proceedings to uphold his right to participate in his own trial. Jury selection in the Combs case is set to begin at 8 a.m., and the goal is to get 45 jurors in 3 days, so that both the prosecution and defense they have May 8th and 9th to prepare for opening statements by May the 12th. Okay, so the trial will not be televised. I'm sure you already know that, because most federal trials are not typically, and as cameras are typically not allowed in federal criminal trial proceedings. Okay, that's the main reason. And USA Today will be reporting live in the courtroom. Okay, now Diddy, of course, we already know what he's charged with, so we're going to skip past all that. Combs' charges echo some of the allegations in more than 70 civil lawsuits filed against the Bad Boy Records founder. The claims of sexual abuse, drugging, and physical assault span 3 decades and include a lawsuit filed and quickly settled by ex-girlfriend singer Cassie. Okay. What was Diddy's plea deal? During an April 25th pretrial conference, a prosecutor said Combs rejected a plea deal. The attorney did not share the terms of the plea deal, but indicated that she wants Subramanian to confirm with Combs directly that his lawyers told him about the offer and that he made the decision to turn it down. See, they want to make sure that the lawyers are just not, keeping this information to themselves and not giving it to Diddy. Okay. Subramanian indicated that he will directly question Combs about the deal at the May 1st hearing. And that's what he did today. And Diddy did confirm that his attorneys told him all about it and he didn't want to take it. Okay. So despite repeated attempts at bail, Combs was ordered to remain in custody at the Special Housing Unit and Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center ahead of his trial, a ruling his legal team has challenged in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Okay. He has been in custody since his arrest September the 16th of 2024. All right. So with that all being said, it's down to the wire right now, you all. It's down to the wire. Okay. It is down to the wire. Now let's talk about coercive control. This is something that you won't be hearing. This is a phrase that you won't be hearing at Diddy's trial. Okay. And why is that? Well, let's talk about it because this is important. You see, there's no shortage of discussion over the impending New York trial of rapper Sean Diddy Combs. One phrase you won't hear during the legal process is coercive control. You see, Combs was arrested in September in 2025 in Manhattan and charged with, well, we already know what. And the trial is supposed to start May the 5th with jury selection. Now, as the trial looms, federal prosecutors and Combs' legal team have clashed over what expert witness testimony the jury is going to be allowed to hear. Now, Judge Arun Subramaniam ruled that psychologist Dawn Hughes, now this is the same lady that had something to do with the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. Okay, so Dawn Hughes is the expert and she's a psychologist. She's not allowed to discuss coercive control, okay, which is a type of domestic violence or domestic abuse. So she's, however, allowed to discuss coping strategies for victims and why many victims stay in abusive or violent relationships. So she can talk about that, but she can't bring up coercive control. Okay, and basically because that may, in the judge's opinion, be speculation or something that you just can't 100% prove. I don't know why they're not allowing her to talk about it, but she can't. The prosecution wanted her to, and then Diddy's people didn't. So the ruling is significant in this case as prosecutors will bring alleged victims of Diddy's to testify about abuse, and defense attorneys will try to dispute their statements. Accusers' past communications with Diddy prior to statements about him and anything and everything that we've previously said about the allegations is likely to be scrutinized. People can lose their perspective when they are under the thumb of an abusive person. This is what psychologist Lisa Fontes, PhD, author of Invisible Chains, and a frequent expert witness in cases related to sexual violence and coercive control. This is what she says. She says, Mr. Combs' wealth and fame gave him an extraordinary amount of power. He is certainly not the first man to alleged to have used that power to sexually exploit others. Now, coercive control is a term that was popularized by a sociologist by the name of Evan Stark, who theorized that the way abusers take over their victims' lives is similar to the psychological torture and control used on prisoners of war and cult members. Okay, I can see that. It makes perfect sense to me. Now, domestic abuse cases, however, are often discussed in the context of physical and or sexual violence, but coercive control tactics could be, they could include those as well, but also many other things such as isolation, intimidation, micromanagement, monitoring, financial, verbal, and litigation abuse. Okay, this is what Fontes also says. Now, the issue with the way domestic violence is discussed, trauma experts say that if the victims are almost, or they say basically the victims are almost never really taken seriously unless they have proof that they're being physically harmed. Okay, coercive control is verbal, you see. So there's a difference. Now, it's psychological and much more difficult to prove in a court of law, is what they say. And that's what I figured, because, like I said, if it's something that you don't physically see, sometimes the jurors may be confused, okay, when they try to explain that or whatever. So they're just going to leave that out, okay? And, people don't understand that these psychological tactics are extremely harmful to the brain, according to Christine Cocciola, a social worker and advocate who specializes in cases of coercive control and narcissistic abuse, because that's who does that, narcissists. And I absolutely think that Diddy's a narcissist and a sociopath to boot. Now, she says the brain actually becomes trauma bonded to these abusers and sadly is not able to really clearly discern between what's healthy and unhealthy. Okay, you could take a really healthy person and all of a sudden they're engaged in a really harmful relationship. It kind of sounds like, or puts me in the mind of Stockholm Syndrome. Now, Subramaniam has not publicly explained why coercive control cannot be discussed during the trial, but I just gave you my own theory, my speculation. Is that because he feels like that's something that will confuse the jury perhaps, and also something that you can't prove 100%. It's just basically professional opinion. Okay, but legal experts say that it likely has to do with the fact that only 7 states in the U.S. have laws about coercive control: California, Colorado, Connecticut, Hawaii, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Wisconsin. But New York, where Combs was charged, currently does not. Well, I didn't know that. So maybe that is why also, because they don't even have a law for that in New York. Now, coercive control is a newer term in the legal world and is only considered a form of domestic abuse from a legal standpoint in those 7 states. It's also criminalized in the United Kingdom, and even in those states, Cocchiola notes that it's still very hard to prove. Okay, so when it comes to Diddy's case, there's a chance the prosecution could motion for permission to use the term as the trial continues. Okay, this is what Joan Meyer, a clinical law professor and director of George Washington University Law School's National Family Violence Law Center, says. If not, she believes it's possible to talk around it at the trial and still make an impact, saying that if the expert is allowed to testify about why victims don't leave or stay connected, that's mostly attributable to coercive control. So I trust that they will get it in that way, she speculates. Still, talking about coercive control in relation to prominent cases or figures is really important because it makes sense of things which otherwise don't seem to make sense, Meyer says. Okay, so anyway, I'm not going to read all of this. It's a whole lot, honey. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is Diddy's people definitely don't want them talking about coercive control. And guess what? They're not going to be able to talk about it. Okay, so please pay attention. Now, with that all being said, here's the next thing that I find very interesting. So victim number 3 made a very interesting request. Okay, victim number 3 made a very interesting request. And that request is to be able to identify themselves. Because remember, victims 2, 3, and 4 are supposed to remain anonymous. Only victim 1, which is Cassie, is supposed to be identified. But now victim number 3 wants to be identified. Okay, and I think I know who victim number 3 is. Now, since she's going to be identified, we're going to all find out who she is. But I think I already know. Okay, so with that all been said, just remember, you heard it here first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the video that I did that I was actually going to upload. Okay, that I was actually going to upload. I'm going to go ahead and play that video. It's like about 10 minutes. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Likes up, everyone, please like and share. Thank you in advance. As you can clearly see, I think it's Gina Hoon. Okay, please pay attention. I'm almost positive that's who it is. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in once again to the original Queen Ahmadiyyah Shakur show. I'm your host, Queen Ahmadiyyah Shakur, and this is your daily dose of Diddy. Okay, so let's talk about it because the defense counsel as well as the prosecution have been going back and forth, opposing each other over a myriad of different things. And one of those things is whether or not victims 2, 3, and 4 are going to be able to use pseudonyms. Now, Diddy's team, they want these people to be, to have to show who they are, to have to identify themselves. Whereas the prosecution has been saying, no, they shouldn't have to say who they are. And because of the charges or whatever, you don't want people who claim they were victims of assault or involved, victims of trafficking or whatever, to have to show who they are, because then less people would want to come out and speak on these things or report these sorts of crimes, right? But, some judges say that at the end of the day, there are victims who testify every day in America about crimes that happen to them. So whether you're a victim of trafficking, sexual assault, a home invasion, burglary, robbery, or whatever, victims have to testify. So they should not have special privileges because of the crime that was supposedly committed upon them, right? So they've been going back and forth. Now, with that all being said, what's interesting is that victim number 3 now wants to come out and identify. They don't want to use a pseudonym, okay? They want to say who they are. And one of the reasons is probably because they said they've already been known to the public. Okay, now remember, 2 and 3 are people who were involved in long-term relationships with Diddy. And I think maybe I know who victim number 3 is. I just have an inkling that it may not be correct, but let's go to the paperwork. Likes up, everyone. Please don't forget to like and share. Thank you in advance. Here is what they have to say. And again, this is victim number 3. Okay, so they say, Dear Judge Subramaniam, okay, the government writes in response to the court's April 22nd, 2025 order seeking additional information regarding the use of a pseudonym for victim 3 at the upcoming trial in the above captioned matter. After conferring with victim 3's counsel, the government understands that victim 3 does not wish to use a pseudonym during her testimony. Okay, respectfully submitted, J. Clayton, United States Attorney. So, as I said, victim 3 is willing to say who they are. And again, they said they've already been known to public. So the fact that this is someone, this is what we do know. This is someone who was in a long-term relationship with Diddy. This is someone who also is known to the public. Okay, so we've seen them before. We've heard of them. Okay, so that further makes me think that maybe it's Gina, but also because there was another thing that they were going back and forth. So Diddy had his team file a motion in limine. And remember when I talked to you about motions filed in limine before, it just basically means that there's a motion filed to keep certain evidence or testimony to keep it out of the trial, to have it excluded. Okay, so now Diddy filed a motion in limine basically to keep medical evidence, okay, out of the trial. Because remember, there was a victim or is a victim who claims that Diddy forced them to have some sort of medical procedure. Now, we don't know what the medical procedure is, and I would love to know what it is. And first, I was thinking maybe it's Cassie, because Cassie had the breast job done, and then Diddy got into it with her doctor, Frank Ryan, who's now deceased, by the way. But, so maybe it isn't Cassie's breast implants that was the procedure. Even though that would make sense if it was the breast implants, because think about it, they're charging Diddy with trafficking, and they're trying to prove all these different things that Diddy did that would lead the jurors to know or feel that he was actually trafficking. Okay, so with that all being said, if Cassie was forced to get breast implants, well, that would make sense. Okay, that's plausible, because if you're trying to traffic someone, then you would do things where they would be of more value, or you could make more money off of them. So that's why I was thinking maybe it was that. But then I thought about Gina Hunn. Now, when she was interviewed by Tasha K in 2019, she talked about how she was pregnant, okay, and how Diddy had stomped on her stomach and all these things or whatever. So I was thinking maybe that's the medical procedure. I still don't know. I still can't really say, but what I will say is this. All of a sudden, that's no longer anything to oppose, even though the prosecution wanted to have that evidence brought in and Diddy's team did not. And that's why they filed a motion in limine. But now the prosecution doesn't seem to want or need that evidence. Okay. So on this filing that came out some days ago, on the 28th, okay, now there is a footnote that says longer, and I think it's supposed to be no longer, okay, if there's a word left off, no longer plans to elicit testimony at trial regarding victim 3's medical procedures. As a result, no voir dire question on the topic is needed, and the defendant's motion on that topic is moot. So that means that the motion that Diddy had filed in limine to keep the medical evidence out, well, that's no longer valid. It doesn't even matter. It's irrelevant at this point, because they don't want to argue that case or that point anymore anyway. Now, as I said, Gina talked about Diddy beating her, stomping her stomach while she was pregnant. I don't know, but I think that it possibly could be Gina. But also because of some of the things that she did say in that Tasha K interview. Okay, and I'm going to play some of that, but I'm going to use an overlay, okay, because I don't have permission. And so please pay attention. With that all being said, let me see what I'm going to put up here. Okay, and don't forget to like and share, okay? Don't forget to like and share. Thank you in advance. Okay, and now mind you, Gina Hoon was supposedly dating Diddy for like at least 5 of the years when he was with Cassie. And even after she did that Tasha K interview, she started back messing around with Diddy, allegedly. That is what was said. And I absolutely believe it, because if you remember, she also got into it with Young Miami about Diddy. Young Miami was on the internet calling her the B word and telling her that she was an eater, and that if she had wanted her to, Diddy would have made her get down on her knees for her. Remember all that crazy stuff she was saying? So yeah, I really think it was Gina.
And he grabbed your hair and stuff like that. Like, Can you name a few more instances?
The other time was he had caught me texting another man. We was in Miami, and it got really crazy that time.
Madison, from David Yurman. Inspired by the rhythm of New York City and a chance encounter that...
We was upstairs, and he had like, we were in his closet, and he like pushed me, and I fell to the ground, and then he like stood over me. So I was like laying on my back, and he stood over me, and he started like punching me like this. Like, he avoided my face, but he like started punching me like on the side of my head, and I was just like covering my face. And he did that, and then after he got done doing that, he like, because he was standing, his legs were like in between me, so he like stomped on my stomach like really hard, and I like took the wind out of my breath. I couldn't breathe, and he kept hitting me, and I was like pleading to him, like, can you stop? I can't breathe.
And Gina actually opened up about being pregnant by Diddy when she did that interview with Tasha K. Let's take a quick listen.
When was the first time you became pregnant with Diddy's child?
The first time was October 2014, but because I met him in February, and then I got pregnant in October the same year.
Okay. And you mind telling me what happened with that pregnancy?
Well, I told him, and he was like, you're gonna get an abortion, right? And then I was like, I don't know. And then he offered me $50,000 to get rid of it, but I turned it down because I just loved him, and I was like trying to prove that I wasn't the girl that was wanted him for money.
Okay.
I just care about him, and I just wanted him to be nice to me. That's it.
Okay, so you heard that she was pregnant by him supposedly more than once, because Tasha said the first time. But it's really sad because she said she was just in love with him. Okay, and she just wanted him to know it, I guess, and didn't want him to think that, okay, you can just, pay me off with this $50,000, because at the end of the day, she didn't want him to think that she cared about him or didn't really care about him, but was only with him for money. So it's really sad, if what she says is true, and I believe that it absolutely is, honey. Diddy is just low down and nefarious at the end of the day. Okay, please pay attention, honey. And by the way, another thing that makes me think that Gina Hoon is the person that is victim 3 is because they said that Diddy would threaten these women with taking away their finances or whatever, because he was paying, in some cases, paying for their apartments, their cars and things like that. We definitely know he was with Cassie, according to what Cassie has said. But also, they said this is a way that Diddy kept control over these women. Remember, the prosecutors have alleged that Diddy was using his power and his money and his influence to keep them in line. Okay, so if someone's paying your bills and you don't have the money to live the way you want to live, or at least you don't have the money to afford to live the way they're paying for you to live, you can't afford it, well, then you may be, that may be incentive for you to deal with certain things that you wouldn't normally deal with. Okay, and so one of the things that I found out was that Gina Hoon was actually on Diddy's payroll. Okay, and that's her real name, Virginia. Okay, so this is from Combs Enterprise, and it says, Dear Virginia, the purpose of this letter is to provide you with a formal offer to join Combs Enterprises. Okay, specifically, you are being offered the position of marketing coordinator. All right, and so please pay attention. Yeah, absolutely, this would be a way, because even if she wasn't literally working for him, just to have her listed as an employee and then be sending her, checks or whatever, as if she's an employee or whatever, that's basically, that's her livelihood, or that's where she was getting her money from, perhaps. Or, and not just her, other people as well, because think about it. In one of the lawsuits, it said that Young Miami was on Diddy's payroll. Okay, that Christina Courtroom was the one dispersing the money, wiring the money to these individuals, certain ones of them, and that would be Daphne Joy as well as Young Miami. Okay, so these are other allegations. So I definitely think it was Gina Hoon, but you all, what do y'all think? Okay, that's what I'd like to know, what you all think about it all. Please pay attention. With that all being said, I definitely think that victim 3 is Gina Hoon. Okay, because like she said, she's already known to the public. She was in a long-term relationship with Diddy, right? At least 5 of the years that he was with Cassie. Okay, and here's the thing. It would make sense for the state to use her as a witness against Diddy for the simple fact that, she was done, or she's made some of the statements or some of the same things that Cassie has alleged. She is the person that is victim number 3, who wants to identify, doesn't want to go by pseudonym any longer, and said that she's already been known to the public. And this is, again, someone who was in a relationship with Diddy. So you all drop me a comment to let me know what you think. Okay, so with that all being said, first of all, Antoinette said, Queen, you have on the same outfit on today as your video. It threw me off for a second. Well, I did that video today. Okay, you may not have been here when the video first started. So let me just tell you and anybody who came in late, beloved, I recorded that video today. I was going to upload it for you all, but since I decided to go ahead and go live, I just showed it now instead of uploading it. Okay, so that's why I have on the same outfit. Now, here's what I want you all to pay attention to. So when Gina Hoon was saying that she was pregnant by Diddy multiple times or whatever. And she talked about how Diddy told her, you're going to have an abortion. And he offered her $50,000 to get rid of it. And she refused the money because she was in love with it. So this is why I further think it's her, because remember, they said that there was a discrepancy where Diddy and his attorneys were trying to keep medical information from being talked about and discussed during the trial. Now, if there was an abortion, couldn't you really understand why they wouldn't want that to be there? People would look at him like he's crazy. First of all, you allegedly beat this woman, stepped on her stomach, stomped her in the stomach when she was pregnant. And then you have Cassie, who is pregnant, walking in there with a big belly. Can you imagine how they're going to be looking at him? Just like the nefarious person that he is. Okay, I'm just saying. So, of course, they wouldn't want that to come there. So I absolutely think that she's victim 3, because victim 3 said that they're already known to public, okay, because they were in a relationship with Diddy for a while. So everybody already knows them anyway, they said. And so they don't feel like they need to hide themselves. Also, this whole thing about the medical procedure. That's one person who claims Diddy made her get a medical procedure. Okay, it could be Cassie's breast implant surgery that Diddy made Cassie get. But at the end of the day, I don't think that Diddy just forced Cassie to get the breast implants. I think Cassie wanted to get them as well. But the problem is when Cassie got them, remember I told you all they were too big and Diddy didn't like them. So he made her get them redone, like right then and there. And Dr. Frank Ryan didn't even want to. He wanted to wait till she healed, but Diddy refused. And, then Dr. Frank Ryan turned up dead, but after having a beef with Diddy. So maybe that's just coincidence. But nonetheless, I absolutely think that it's Gina. Okay, and Gina made some of the same allegations about Diddy. She talked about Diddy grabbing her by her hair and dragging her on the ground and just very similar things, okay? Very similar accusations. And so, think about that, because what that would do, that would be great for them to bring her in, because to have 2 victims saying the same thing, Cassie doesn't even have to say it. They're gonna see the videotape of him dragging her by the hair. Okay, but then if Gina gets up there and she's victim 3, and let's not forget they did say that victims 2 and 3 are people who were in long-term relationships with Diddy. Gina was definitely in a long-term relationship with Diddy. And victim number 4 is supposedly a former employee. Okay, now you see that caption? Sean Diddy Combs' ex, Gina Hoon, once claimed he stomped her stomach, dragged her by the hair. Okay, same story, different day, because that's exactly what he did to Cassie. Okay, so that's why I think it's her. All right, please pay attention. All right, Antoinette's in my bad, Queen. Girl, it's no big deal. I was just saying, okay? So, what do y'all think? Let me know, honey, because Diddy is also nefarious. Now, while y'all are pondering on that, let's talk about Caysen Allison. Okay, so for those of you who don't remember the story of Caysen Allison, I'm going to bring it back to the forefront of your memory right now. So with the story of Carmelo Anthony, the young black man who stabbed someone at a track meet because it was self-defense. He feared for his life, according to him. And it was two brothers, twins. We all know the story. And then I told you all the story that they're not talking about in the mainstream media, okay, about Caysen Allison, who murdered somebody as well when he was 18 years old. And he too said it was self-defense, but no, it was actually premeditated because he knew that he and Joe Ramirez were going to fight. They'd already made a date to fight. Like when we were in high school, we'd say, yeah, I'll meet you outside at 3 o'clock and we're going to go at it, whatever. You know how teenagers do. So they had already planned they were going to have a fight. But what they didn't plan on was Caysen Allison bringing a knife to school. And that's what he did. And he murdered that boy. He killed him. He stabbed him multiple times. Nobody can convince me that it was self-defense. Not when you stab somebody 5 and 6, 7 times. And then he knew exactly where to stab him. He must have been an avid hunter, I'm thinking. Somebody taught him how to hunt, clearly, because he stabbed him in the lungs, the heart, and the carotid arteries. Both of them. Now, I'm sorry. You think that was an accident? Of course not. But guess what? Do you know what his verdict was? We're going to get into that in a second, but let you all see some of the details of this story for those of you who may have missed it.
Dominic Lay reporting live in Belton. Both sides made opening arguments today in day one of the trial against Caysen Allison. Allison is accused of the stabbing death of former Belton High School classmate Joe Ramirez back in 2022. Now, I got to sit in the courtroom today while witnesses made their statements.
Justice for Joe. We miss him. We love you.
That was the feeling from friends and family of Joe Ramirez. While I was in the courtroom, prosecutors played 5 phone calls made to 911. 4 were made by staff and students on the school grounds, including some who told dispatchers there was, quote, lots of blood in the main hallway. A student leaving the school told 911 they could see Allison running through the parking lot and driving away. After those calls, prosecutors also showed video surveillance from inside the school the morning the stabbing happened. It shows Joe Ramirez and a few of his friends walking into the boys' bathroom and Allison walking in with one of his friends moments later. The victim and his friends run out before taking off through the hallways. The video goes on to show Ramirez turning the corner and stumbling to the ground with blood tracking down the school's main hallway. The school's director of safety and security told the court that's when campus went into lockdown and teachers and nurses were seen giving life-saving efforts to Ramirez. A nearby teacher also testified about hearing, quote, really loud yelling and banging, and then witnessed, quote, a student had a hand on his chest and blood drops on the floor. She also told the jury she told a custodian to not clean up the blood because it was, quote, a crime scene. I got the chance to talk with one of Ramirez's friends, James Sandoval. He tells me he wants people to remember Joe as a sweet, loving, funny guy. I asked Sandoval what it was like for him to see the video of his friend losing his life.
It's tough. It's really tough. But yeah, emotions were high when that video was going, you know. But you can't, just watch him. Just be out.
Now, the defense says Caysen was in the fight of his life and that he was jumped by 5 classmates, calling it a group beatdown. They also say that while we mourn Ramirez, we're not here to feel sorry for a victim, and that, quote, nothing good happens in a boy's bathroom. Now, I did mention surveillance video. While that surveillance video in the school played, it was definitely emotional for Ramirez's family. Allison has pleaded not guilty, and testimony will continue tomorrow. We'll give you all the updates when we learn more. Reporting live in Belton, I'm...
Okay, so you all heard it. He stabs him about 5 or 6 times, okay? Keep that in mind. Also, there was some more documents about Diddy that I absolutely forgot to read to you guys, and I have them pulled up and everything. Okay, so maybe I'll get into them after this. Now listen, because here's what happened at the end of the case. we refer to as splitting the baby. Legal expert explains jury's criminally negligent homicide verdict in Caysen Allison's trial. Do y'all hear this? Legal experts suggest the verdict represents a compromise, with jurors including Allison's actions went beyond reasonable self-defense, but lacked intent to kill. Now, how the hell did it lack intent to kill when this young man brought a knife to a fist fight that they already planned? He wasn't caught off guard. It wasn't by surprise. Nobody instigated anything. The both of them knew they didn't like each other. And here's the thing. People actually testified at the trial that Caysen had threatened Ramirez multiple times. Multiple times. They didn't want to stick it to him because he's white. Point blank, period. Okay? I don't care what anybody says. Now, with that all being said, a Bell County jury returned a guilty verdict of criminally negligent homicide in the trial of former Belton High School student Caysen Allison after more than 12 hours of deliberation. Allison was accused of stabbing Joe Ramirez to death in a school bathroom in 2022. The judge rejected the more serious charges of murder and manslaughter, opting instead of the least severe criminal charge where they were allowed to consider. Allison now faces, now check this out. This is what he's facing. Allison now faces 180 days to 2 years for murder, where you stab somebody 5 or 6 times in their lung, their heart, and both their carotid arteries. Okay? In a high school bathroom. All right? Somebody that you had made a date, made plans, made arrangements to fight. Okay? Now, remember, he did lie and say that 5 people jumped him, but there's no proof of that. All of the other people that were witnesses said that's not the case. And they actually have the stabbing on footage. They had video footage of it. And then they show him running out after he did it. They didn't say anything about anybody jumping him, so he lied, okay? But this is all he's going to get is 180 to 2 years. 180 days to 2 years. So y'all hear this? For murder. Okay, but they want to stick it to Carmelo Anthony, who actually was defending himself and didn't do anything anywhere near as heinous. Okay, so 180 days to 2 years in the state jail facility, not even a prison. Okay, they won't send him there. Now, legal analyst Liz Mitchell explained that the jury's decision likely represents a compromise after lengthy deliberations, saying this is often one of those cases that we refer to as splitting the baby. There were likely people on both sides of the fence. They were given many options, and sometimes it's best for jurors to reach a verdict. It might not feel like it fits perfectly into the elements of the offense, but it's ultimately a compromise. The verdict suggests jurors believed Allison's actions were dangerous and unjustified, but not intentional. Throughout the trial, the defense team argued that Allison acted in self-defense during a confrontation initiated by others. A confrontation initiated by others when they planned to fight and then initiated by others. So they're acting like it was more than just Joe. See, they're trying to go as if he was, I guess they painted the narrative that he was jumped, even though there was nothing that proved that, okay? Even the video. Now, goes on to say, at the same time, the prosecutors contended that his actions went well beyond what was considered reasonable self-defense. Mitchell noted that self-defense claims fundamentally change how juries elevate or evaluate cases. With a self-defense claim, you're having a defendant say, yes, I committed the offense. However, I was justified in doing so. So that completely shifts the narrative of the case. We don't have a defendant saying it wasn't me, I didn't do it. They're stepping up saying, yes, I did it, but my actions are justified under the law in the state of Texas. Well, we'll see how this all works out for Carmelo, because that's the same thing he's saying. Okay, now in a significant procedural decision, Allison has chosen to have Judge Faulkner determine his sentence rather than the jury. The sentencing phase is scheduled to begin on June the 16th at 9 a.m. Oh, so he wants the judge to choose his punishment rather than the jury. Well, I'm sure that the judge looks like him, and the judge probably was showing him some empathy in the court. That's likely why his lawyers told him to ask for the judge to decide the sentence rather than the jury, because they look for things like that. Okay? And yeah, so please pay attention. Just think about how the judge was so it was so obvious the judge was for Kyle Rittenhouse. When we watched the trial, do you remember how the judge was being so friendly towards Kyle Rittenhouse and so empathetic and all of that? You already knew how it was going to go. Okay, same thing here, I'm sure. So anyway, they go on to say, in a significant procedural decision, Allison has chosen to have the judge determine his sentence or whatever. The sentencing phase is scheduled to begin on June 16th at 9 a.m. The severity of Allison's sentence could hinge on whether there is an affirmative finding of a deadly weapon. Okay, if there is an affirmative finding of a deadly weapon, the judge cannot give the defendant probation. So what probation? Is that even in the cards? So he could get probation. He could just get off. Okay, with no jail time at all. So basically the 180 days to 2 years is the most that he can get. Okay, so please pay attention. So anyway, what's the difference? No, I'm sorry. It's the difference between the defendant getting probation and serving his term in community supervision, or if there is a deadly weapon finding, serving time in a penitentiary. Okay, so that's the only thing. They'll send him to a prison to serve time if they say it was a deadly weapon. Now, Judge Faulkner has ordered the probation department to prepare a pre-sentence investigation report, which will examine Allison's background, character, and the circumstances of the offense. So he's probably going to get probation. I want y'all to pay attention on it. Now, Mitchell, because he's already telling the probation department to start working on it. Okay, he's already made up his mind, as far as I'm concerned. Mitchell noted that judges often take into consideration different factors than juries when determining sentences. Now, in this case, we have a defendant who has never been involved in any criminal justice system. Oh, neither has Carmelo Anthony. Let's remember all of this and see how it works out for him. Now, he is set up for a successful life, Mitchell said. Oh, so is Carmelo. A jury, it's sometimes harder for jurors to put emotion aside and look at just the facts. With judges, they are looking strictly at the facts. Now, while criminal convictions by juries are typically appealed, legal experts suggest that appealing this verdict would be risky for Allison. Yeah, because he's a cold-blooded killer. And this is just, I'm surprised he got this. Well, actually, I'm not surprised because he has the complexion for the protection. But yeah, definitely he doesn't want to mess this up because he's not going to get any better deal than this. If he appeals the case and it's reversed and remanded, meaning it is sent back to the trial court, the state can try him again, and that means you are rolling the dice and could be convicted of murder the second time around, which he should have been convicted of in the first place. Now, Judge Faulkner denied Allison's request to have his ankle monitor removed. Oh, he was just getting too excited. Now he got this minuscule sentence or a minuscule conviction and possibly won't even serve any jail time, but he already wants his ankle monitor removed. It's the entitlement of it all for me. Only somebody his complexion would ask for that. But let's continue. But he will remain free on bond until his sentence, you know. Okay. Now the case is drawn significant, but they threatened the judge who granted Carmelo Anthony a bond. Okay, please pay attention. Now, the case has drawn significant attention as it raises questions about school safety, self-defense, and the juvenile justice system. Community members on both sides continue to grapple with the tragic circumstances that led to the death of a high school student and the potential incarceration of another. All I can say is prayers and condolences to Joe Ramirez. He was a handsome young man, and I'm sure he had a bright future. And prayers and condolences to his family. This is all so nefarious as far as I'm concerned. Okay, and so anyway, honey, what do y'all think? I find it all interesting. But so anyway, let's talk about, hold on. Do y'all want me to go back and read the paperwork about Diddy? Hold on, let me see here. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read this. Nah, you know what? I'm going to save it for in the morning. All right. Now, but I will say this. I was going to do a separate video, but I'm going to talk about this real quick. Israel is on fire. Okay. Did y'all know about that? One's in the chat if you all heard about Israel being on fire. One's in the chat if you all heard about that. Christopher said he needs counseling. Okay, so I don't know what's going on. They're trying to blame it on Hamas. They say Hamas did it. But yeah, they said Israel's on fire. It's been reported. Hold on, let me pull up my receipts. This is all a hot mess. They're battling the worst wildfires in the country's history, they say. I mean, it's looking like California. Some people are saying it's the Most High's wrath. You know, I don't know, but it's a whole lot going on. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. Okay, likes up, everyone. Please like and share. Here we go. I'm going to put an overlay on this because I don't know about the BBC's news, if they let you share this or not. I can't remember, but just in case.
Called in Israel as strong winds and high temperatures have fueled wildfires outside of Jerusalem. Fire crews have been battling the fires there, with several people reported to have been suffering from burns and smoke inhalation. It's according to Israel's medical emergency services there. Well, let's speak to our Middle East correspondent, Yolande Nell. Yolande, talk us through the situation there.
So from what we understand, there are still about 6 areas in the hills outside of Jerusalem where you've got firefighters battling these flames. They're being helped by the Israeli army as well. There are several towns in that area that have been evacuated. About 3,000 acres of land have been burnt. Now, when the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was talking about this, he said there had been a deadly combination of dryness and strong winds. You can see the wind is starting to pick up again now. In some cases, arson is suspected, also poor land management. And inevitably, the Israeli media is really picking over this today, talking about the state's level of preparedness for such wildfires, because this is said to have been the biggest fire that the country has experienced. And Israel has become more prone to wildfires of this kind in recent years, with experts warning that climate change is just going to make it even more prone, that their fire hazard is increasing.
Yolande, thank you for that. Well, let's speak now to BBC weather presenter Simon King, who's standing by for us. Simon, just talk us through what's been happening.
Yeah, so Lewis, of course, the wildfire itself may have been started by arson or other methods there, as Yolande said, about the poor land management. But of course, when a fire starts, you look to the weather conditions, to how severe or how far they may spread. Now, in Israel and Jerusalem, we've been seeing some strong winds recently. Gusts today are up to about 50, 60 kilometers an hour. And they, of course, just fan these flames. And they're coming in from a westerly direction, which means at the moment, they are on the border of Israel and Jerusalem, and there is concern that with that westerly wind, it will push the flames a little bit further eastward into Jerusalem itself. Now, temperatures across Israel and Jerusalem haven't actually been that high, around about average really, of about 22 to 25 degrees Celsius. But of course, we're now going into the dry season in that region, so of course the vegetation.
Okay, so you all see that. I mean, it's really burning, honey. Pay attention. It's really burning. Now, I did say there was an article where they were basically trying to say that Hamas did it or whatever. Okay, that's the conclusion they seem to have come to. Now, here's another video that I saw on Instagram.
Fires erupted in Israel just as the country was getting ready to celebrate its 77th Independence Day. These fires are burning through densely populated neighborhoods near Jerusalem and across busy highways, forcing people to evacuate and run for safety. Right now, there are over 100 firefighting teams and 12 aircrafts fighting the fires, and over a dozen people have already been hospitalized. We don't know exactly how it started, but there have been arrests for arson. And now we're seeing posts from Palestinian channels calling for more people to light fires across Israel. This isn't new. In the past, Palestinian terrorists from Gaza have launched firebombs tied to balloons that burned thousands of acres of Israeli land, including homes, farmland, and forests. Israel Independence Day is more than a celebration. It's a statement that Israel exists and that we're here to stay. I'm Isla.
Okay, I mean, as usual, I'm not surprised that that's who they're saying did it. Okay, at the end of the day. Now, with that all being said, DJ Mailer said, D Major said, Trump better not give those folks any money for relief. Okay. Here's the last thing I want to tell you all before I roll out of here. Like I said, I'm going to save this paperwork that I have about Diddy. Let me see. I could go ahead and get into it. Let me see here. Let me see here. Well, I do want to go ahead and say this. Jay McClendon said bias coverage. I agree. I agree. Okay. Reggie said you heard it here first. Thank you, beloved. Okay, so listen, here's what I want to tell you all. I almost forgot to get into detail about Diddy's team. They told the judge today at the pretrial hearing, Mark Agnifilo, Diddy's lead counsel, Red said, go ahead, Queen, tell us. Okay, I'll go ahead and get into it. Because I can get it done in like 15 minutes and I can still be done by 8. Okay, so great. So anyway, listen. So Diddy's lead attorney, Mark Agnifilo, said that they were hiring 2 more attorneys. 2 more attorneys, you guys. So I'm going to tell you who I think these 2 attorneys are. We already know that Brian Steele, Young Thug's attorney, already took on, signed on to the team. He already filed his pro hoc vice and all of that. Okay, and I do believe he's already been approved. And then now, but if you remember, I told you all that Diddy asked Joe Tacopina to come aboard, and Joe Tacopina said the only reason he wouldn't is because he felt like it was too late in the game. Now, with that all being said, Joe Tacopina is ASAP Rocky's attorney. Okay, so but here's who I think it is. Now they said they hired 2 more. Okay, well, Mark Garagos, because if you remember, I told you all days ago that Mark Garagos, I feel like he's going to be part of Diddy's team because he's privy to information of what's going on with the council. Of course, his daughter, Teeny Garagos, is one of Diddy's lead attorneys as well. Well, she's not the lead attorney, but she's one of Diddy's attorneys, okay? So her father is someone who's worked with Diddy in the past, and they did mention him coming on. But then remember, days ago, I asked you all, I said, wait a minute, where's Mark Garagos? Because they didn't have him mentioned in the filings. When they listed all the attorneys, they didn't have his name. So I said, but I thought he was joining. So that's who I think it is, Mark Garagos, number 1. And the second one, I think, is going to be Joe Tacopina. Now, if it isn't Joe Tacopina, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's probably Camille Vasquez. Now, if you don't know who Camille Vasquez is, she was Johnny Depp's attorney when he took on Amber Heard. Okay, so she's good too. So probably one of those 2. That's just my guess. Okay, so now let's get into this paperwork about Diddy that I forgot to tell you all about, and that'll be good so I don't have to go over it tomorrow. And I'm going to share my screen and pull this up. It's only 4 pages, so we can still get out of here by 8 o'clock. Please pay attention. Okay. All right. So with that all being said, let me put my overlay on here. I mean, that's not the one I want. Hold on. My watermark is what I meant. Okay. So now listen to this. Dear Judge Subramanian, now this is coming from the prosecution, okay? They wrote this on the 28th. Dear Judge Subramanian, the government respectfully writes to address the court's question at the April 25th, 2025 conference regarding the government's motion in limine to preclude any testimony or any other evidence of consensual sexual encounters between the defendant and persons who are not victims in this case. Now, for reasons detailed below, the government respectfully requests that the court preclude any such testimony as irrelevant and based on a substantial likelihood of juror confusion. If the court is inclined to admit such testimony, the government respectfully requests that it be appropriately limited and that the court provide a limiting instruction to the jury. Now, let's talk about this, because what the government is saying here is that they do not want, whenever I tell you, I just want you all to remember some of these legal terms so that you understand what I'm talking about when I go through these papers. Okay, so let's remember that motion in limine is when they file a motion for something they want precluded, something they want excluded, okay, from the trial, something they don't want brought in or entered in as evidence. So they're trying to exclude any evidence of Diddy having possibly women that he used to sleep with or that he was in relationships with coming in and saying that they had relations with him. And the reason they don't want them doing that is because they're trying to establish that Cassie and the other two women that were in long-term relationships with Diddy that are also supposedly victims, that he was making them, forcing them to engage in these freak-offs against their will without their consent. And so that makes it trafficking, is what the state's trying to prove. So the last thing they want is other women who also used to have relations with Diddy, who may have had freak-offs with him, for them to come in and say, well, yeah, this is just what we do. This is how we get down. Yeah, we all consent to it. Okay? They could even say, we had relations with him and Cassie, or him and so-and-so. I've been there without all, it was all of us. They could say anything like that. So the state doesn't want any of this to be brought in. Okay, now let's talk about the background. On April the 2nd of 2025, the government moved in limine to preclude the defendant from offering evidence of his consensual sexual encounters, including sexual encounters similar in kind to freak-offs with women other than the victims. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Now, on April the 12th of 2025, the defendant opposed the motion on the basis that certain potential evidence on this topic is probative, okay, or probative and admissible because it will be offered to negate the government's RICO allegation. Now, do you all hear this? So basically, like I said, they don't want it to mess up what they're trying to do. They said it'll be, it'll really contradict what they're saying, okay? It'll really contradict what they're saying. So they don't want any of that allowed in, which I find it all nefarious. Now, that's just my opinion. But what do you all think? Do you all think it should be allowed in as evidence? Once, if you say yes, twos, if you say no. Do you think it should be? I forgot I muted myself. Christopher says, Queen, you're really good at this law stuff for real. Well, thank you, beloved. I did go to school for criminal justice. Okay. And I've always just been interested in the law. That's one of the reasons I went to school for it. Okay. So thank you. So with that all being said, okay, a lot of you all are saying ones. So you all think that it should be allowed in, and some people think that it shouldn't. Okay. So yeah, so it just seems to me like the state is really trying to tie the defense's hands, because there's certain things that they're asking for the judge not to allow in. Like I've told you all before, and I said it seems like they're trying to tie Diddy's hands behind his back and throw him into the ring and tell him to start swinging. Okay, please pay attention. Okay, so yeah, I just think I don't know if that's a good idea as far as I'm concerned. Okay, because the prosecution should, if they have their case together airtight like they usually do, then they shouldn't worry about the defense, contradicting their case or their evidence. Okay, so anyway, I find it all interesting, but let's continue. Let's continue. Likes up, everyone, please like and share. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so on April the 12th of 2025, the defendant opposed the motion on the basis that certain potential evidence on this topic is probative and admissible because it will be offered to negate the government's RICO allegation. Okay, at the April 25th, 2025 conference, the court identified a sole proper basis for the admission of this evidence, that the evidence would tend to disprove any culpable knowledge or intent on the part of other members of the alleged RICO conspiracy and make less likely the existence of any RICO enterprise that engaged in a pervasive, continuing pattern of abuse. Now, the court ruled that the defendant may be permitted to admit exhibits on this basis, as long as the defendant identified such exhibits for the government in advance to allow for specific objections to the exhibits be litigated. Now, the court further requested a supplemental letter from the government concerning testimony, as opposed to exhibits regarding these consensual encounters. So in determining whether to admit good acts evidence offered by a defendant to prove his innocence, courts apply the rules set out of Federal Rule of Evidence 404. Okay, then they list some cases or whatever. So good acts. Yeah, that's another thing that I thought was strange, that the prosecution doesn't want Diddy's attorneys to be able to introduce any evidence of good acts. Like anything that Diddy did as charitable, anything he did to help his community, things like that. They don't want any of that admitted. Like, that's real crazy to me, because how's he going to prove his character? Okay, or any of the good things about it, right? So they say, however, even where good acts evidence serves as non-propensity purpose, a district court may exclude evidence of a defendant's prior good acts pursuant to Rule 403 if it finds that any minimal probative value of such evidence is outweighed by the likelihood of jury confusion and the risk of jury nullification. The court abuses its discretion if 404B evidence is not sufficiently similar to the charged conduct of the chain of inferences necessary to connect the evidence with the ultimate fact to be proved is unduly long. Okay, this is a whole bunch of rigmarole. Furthermore, if admitted as a protection against unfair prejudice, the court must instruct the jury that it may use the 404B evidence only for the purposes for which it is offered and not as an indication of criminal propensity. Okay, so basically they don't want Diddy to have anything good said about him or brought in as evidence to prove that he's not a really bad person. If it is, they're saying that basically this could probably confuse the jury. Okay, I don't know why they would be confused if things were thoroughly explained and expressed to them. Okay, and then they're basically saying that I guess they feel like that's going to make their evidence not look, significance. Okay, now in opposition to the motion, the defendant acknowledges that good acts evidence, such as other consensual sexual acts of the defendant, is usually not admissible because its relevance normally turns on impermissible propensity inferences. Okay, this is a bunch of legal jargon. They're basically saying that good acts evidence usually is not used, okay, such as other consensual S acts. I don't see how S acts, whether they were consensual or not, would be considered good acts. I don't see how they'll be considered good acts. Okay, good acts would be like something you do to help other people. Okay, I like what they said earlier in the previous filings. Okay, like charitable work. What would that have to do with sexual acts? I don't understand. That's crazy to me. But anyway, however, the defendant nevertheless contends that here evidence of the defendant's prior sexual encounters should be admitted on the basis that it may be relevant to the knowledge of members of the racketeering enterprise of the defendant's abuse of the victims. Okay, the government does not intend to argue at trial that the Combs enterprise engaged in a pattern of ceaseless criminal conduct or that members of the enterprise only facilitated non-consensual encounters. Now, this is what I want you to pay attention to. So listen to this. See, the state, to me, it seems like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, because they're saying that, hey, listen, now I want you all to pay attention. Yes, it is confusing, but I want you all to pay attention. So they're trying to say that they're not going to argue. How can I explain this to you also? You're not so confused. Okay, let me say it like this. So the state is saying that Diddy was having non-consensual sexual activity with these people that are victims, right? That he was making them engage in freak-offs that they didn't want to engage in. So that's all part of the trafficking charges. Now, the defense has said already that the videos they have of Cassie and Diddy and the other S workers or whatever, that was all consensual. So they know that the prosecution knows that the defense is likely going to bring in people who can say that they had relations with Diddy doing the same sort of thing and it was consensual. So now the state is saying, no, we're not going to argue that that didn't happen. We don't even want that brought in because really it's irrelevant and it's just going to confuse the jurors. But we don't even want to argue that he didn't have consensual sex with some of these people, even the people that are his victims. We're not saying that every time he had relations with them that it was non-consensual, because sometimes it probably was consensual. So we're not even going to argue that. So what do by saying they're not going to argue that? They take away the power from the defense, because the defense, like I said, would likely argue that, oh, this was all consensual. But see, the defense is trying to paint the narrative that every time they did these things, it was consensual. Whereas the victims are saying clearly it wasn't, and the prosecution is saying clearly it wasn't, because this is what the victims are saying. Okay? But it kind of seems like to me that the prosecution wants to have their cake and eat it too. Okay, because they want to be able to put all their evidence out there on the table and say whatever they need to say, but they don't want the defense to be able to do the same thing. Okay, please pay attention. All right, that's what it's given. Okay, so anyway, they said they don't intend to argue that. Now, goes on to say, excuse me, I'll skip over some of this. Moreover, presenting evidence of consensual sex acts between the defendant and persons other than the victims only demonstrate a co-conspirator's lack of knowledge or intent has a very high risk of juror confusion. Such testimony could introduce entirely new individuals to the jury, potentially resulting in many trials on issues of whether these women were actually consenting, and would risk confusing the jury as to the scope of the government's theory at trial. It would also provide a back door for the type of good acts propensity evidence that courts routinely preclude. So the saying that they don't allow. Okay, a single occurrence of lawful conduct is simply irrelevant to other occurrences of unlawful conduct. Well, here's the thing. What makes them think it was only a single time? Because Cassie was with Diddy for 10 years. You think out of the whole 10 years she was with Diddy, they only had consensual relations once? Because that's what the prosecutor is trying to say here. Okay, that's what they're saying. A single occurrence of lawful conduct is simply irrelevant to other occurrences of unlawful. Well, one probably would be irrelevant, but I'm sure there's a myriad that were consensual. Okay. Now, with that all being said, to the extent the court declines to preclude this evidence, the court should take special precaution to ensure that evidence is only admitted for the purpose for which the defendant claims it is being offered and does not violate Rule 403. First, testimony regarding the defendant's consensual sexual encounters is only arguably relevant to the knowledge and intent of members of the Combs enterprise. If the sexual encounters were ones that members of the Combs enterprise actually helped to facilitate, and those members were aware of their consensual nature, okay, then accordingly, the court would prevent the defendant from eliciting testimony about sexual encounters with persons other than the victims that members of the Combs enterprise did not help facilitate, or where members of the Combs enterprise were not aware of whether they were consensual or non-consensual. Okay, yeah, this is all confusing. And you know what? I want you all to pay attention. They're trying to be confusing. You see the way the prosecution wrote this up? They meant for it to be confusing so that if it's confusing for the judge who's reading it, then it's going to look like definitely it's going to be confusing for the jurors. What they're basically saying here is you have to really read it carefully. But what it sounds like they're really saying here is that regarding the defendant's consensual sexual encounters is only arguably relevant to the knowledge of intent of members of the Combs enterprise, if the sexual encounters were ones that members of the Combs enterprise actually helped to facilitate. Okay, so they're just saying basically these people that were dealing with Diddy, like his co-conspirators or whatever, if they set things up for people to, the victims, okay, the 4 victims, or specifically victims 1, 2, and 3, the ones that dated Diddy, were in relationships with him for years or whatever. So they're basically saying that some of these people from the Combs enterprise were the ones who helped and facilitated these things. They were the ones who paid the workers. They were the ones who got all the baby oil and everything together, got the hotel rooms and all that set up. So they already know what all was going, they already know what was going on about these freak-offs. But if there were other encounters where Diddy was having relations with other people, where it was consensual or non-consensual even, if the people that were members of the enterprise didn't have anything to do with that, if they didn't have anything to, if they didn't help facilitate it, if they didn't set up things, if they didn't have anything to do with it, then they don't know whether or not it was consensual or non-consensual, is basically what they're saying. So I guess they're trying to say that's pretty much irrelevant, because all we need to stick to are the facts of the people that were involved in the enterprise. And so that would be Cassie, and that would be these victims, okay? Because they were supposedly, the things that happened to them not only happened just because of Diddy, but also because of people who worked with Diddy and his inner circle, who facilitated these things, who set these things up. But guess what? That means Cassie. Because Cassie facilitated some of this stuff too, by her own admission. Cassie said that she was the one calling these people, looking up the guys, picking out the men, and Diddy told her what he wanted, and she was picking out men that fit the description of what Diddy was looking for. So she was one of the people who also facilitated these things. Okay, with that all being said, I just find this all so nefarious. And finally, if the defendant elicits any testimony on this topic, the court should issue an appropriate limiting instruction. That limiting instruction should clarify that such evidence is being offered only to rebut a claim regarding the knowledge and intent of the defendant's co-conspirators. Okay, yeah, they're talking about the co-conspirators who facilitated these things and set it all up, and that jurors should not infer that because the defendant engaged in some consensual sexual encounters other than the defendant's sexual encounters must have also been consensual. Okay, so they're saying if you do let them bring in these other people that say they had consensual relations with Diddy, just please make sure that it is explained thoroughly to them. Okay, to the jurors, okay, the jurors should not infer, that because the defendant, or jurors shouldn't be left thinking that just because Diddy had relationships with these people and it was consensual, and they may have done some of the same things these people are saying happened to them, that doesn't mean that it was consensual over here, and we don't want the jurors to think that. So please make sure they don't infer that. Okay, that's basically what they're saying. All right. Yeah, it is confusing. So, and then last it says, in order to avoid juror confusion, the government would also respectfully request that the judge make clear to the jury that it is not the government's theory that those specific encounters were non-consensual. So they want to make that known, that if y'all are going to say these people over here had relations with Diddy and it was not, and it was consensual, well, please make sure the jury knows that. We don't want them thinking that we're trying to say this too was non-consensual, because that's not what we're saying. Okay, because here's the thing. Why could that be problematic? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Because if the jury, Christopher said that sounded crazy. I know, right? Because here's the thing. Why could that be problematic? Because if the jury thinks that the prosecution is saying this stuff over here is not consensual, but the people or the stuff that they did was non-consensual because it's the same thing that Diddy did to these victims, and the people are sitting there saying, no, we agreed to do it. It was consensual. Then the jury's going to be looking at the prosecution crazy, like, y'all don't know what's consensual and what's not consensual. Because if these people are saying they wanted to do this stuff, how do we know that these people over here didn't want to do it too? And now they're just mad about something or just trying to get money. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why they don't want to let it in. That's why they don't want to let it in. But I'll have to respectfully disagree that this should not be a part of good acts. Sexual activity, that should not be lumped in with good acts. That's just my opinion. Okay, so did you all get that? Did I explain it good enough? I hope y'all are not confused, because it was confusing. Christopher said it sounded crazy. Okay. But of course, DC said all hell broke loose. Okay. All right, so are y'all confused? Did y'all get it? Because I'm about to conclude the broadcast. Anyone have questions, comments, snide remarks? All right, so we'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to this. Honey, I can't wait. I can't wait. I can't believe that it's finally here. Can y'all? Reggie said, I get it. I know you get it, Reggie. Okay? Your IQ is very high. I know this. I know this. I can tell. Okay, so I'm not saying the rest of y'all's IQs are low, but I'm just saying that this is it could be very confusing. It was even confusing me a little. That's why I had to go back and read over it, okay? Please pay attention. So, yeah, and they purposely, did it that way, in my opinion. Okay. Mel said this trial is going to be long and drawn out. Well, they said it should be done in at least 10 weeks, beloved. I don't think it's going to be too long. Okay. Cookie said, Queen, I'm taking a shot of Crown Royal. Not Crown Royal. Queen Sam said, can you go over that again? I missed the first and last part. No, Queen Sam, I can't. So what you can do, beloved, is you can replay this, okay? You can I just gave myself a headache, okay, reading that. It's confusing. Okay. Jay McClinton said, thanks for clearing this up, Queen. You're welcome, beloved. Christopher said, that's only 2 months. Right. So that's not a long time, beloveds. Okay. So listen, I love you all to life. I hope you all enjoy the broadcast, and I'll see you all in the morning. Okay. With your morning wake-up call. Each one teach one. That's how we grow and thrive. Do something productive, constructive, but never destructive. And always remember, beloveds, to keep the Most High first in your lives. And until next time, I will talk to you all again soon. Peace.
With that gold all in my skin, God all in my blood, kings all in my circle. You touch one of mine and you're done. They show no love for the queen. Why you hating on me? Is it cause I'm free and I got Malcolm X in my jeans? I got dreams like King Luther, shed blood like Kunta. You ain't helping my people, I ain't got nothing to say to ya. I want all the smoke like hookah. Talking reparations, America won't be great until they give us compensation. I'm like, I'm the hottest right now. See a bunch of lames out here trying to jock on my style. They be doing too much. I'm the queen, it's too easy. It's like they all at Popeyes, how they be talking so greasy. I just sit back and laugh while these haters get madder. So nefarious how they don't want my pockets with cheddar. I tell them they can do better. These snakes in the grass can leave a bite on your ass, cause y'all be trusting too fast. I got my foot on the gas, other one on they necks. Dropping receipts on haters, you better show some respect. I'm never facing regrets, we only facing the threats. Running through every challenge like a relay, break no sweat. It's a cold game, so I got that blanket with me. Now that my people awaken, ain't no going to sleep. I do not play by my piece. This time I'm playing for keeps. You talking slick, but when I see you like them ends, we gon' meet. And I got gold all in my skin, God all in my blood, kings all in my circle. You touch one of mine and you done. They show no love for the queen. Why they hating on me? Is it cause I'm free and I got Malcolm X in my jeans and I got gold all in my skin, God all in my blood, kings all in my circle. You touch one of mine and you done. They show no love for the queen. Why they hating on me? Is it cause I'm free and I got Malcolm X in my jeans and I got